Then we'll move on to number 4, public comment period not to exceed 45 minutes. Each speaker shall be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. The speaker shall speak on any item. This evening we are going to be using a timer. The timer will go off at 3 minutes. Please respect everybody else in the room. When that timer goes off, that means your time is done with. This is not a sporting event. We are not cheering. We are not praising. We are not going to partake in any of this. I have officers here. If anybody is participating in that, I'm asking them to escort you from the room. So please respect everybody. We want to respect your opinions and get a full understanding of what you have to say and respect our rules also. I will be calling 3 people at a time. You can get in line so that we can keep this moving along. I have a lot of slips here. And I probably will mess up a lot of names. I'll apologize right now because other people's handwriting looks different to me sometimes, and that's how it's going to go. So if I mess up your name, I apologize. So I'm going to start with Vicki Yu. Behind Vicki will be Susan Sheldon and John Scott. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Vicki Yu, 1322 South Toy Road, town of Burlington, Wisconsin. I'm asking for your help tonight because I haven't been able to get my politicians to help me. I am the mother of a son who has 4,000 seizures a day. I'm sure you think that number is fantastic. Our journey has been fantastic, and it takes us to Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. And my son is now a cyborg. He has a computer and a defibrillator installed directly in his brain, and nightly the information gets downloaded into a laptop, and through cable TV it gets uploaded to Cleveland, where a series of electricians study the data and then adjust it accordingly. This device has made life somewhat livable again. We've lost nearly 10 years. My son lost his union welding job for Bucyrus Cat. I lost my job, and it's been a pretty horrific journey to watch your child drop to the floor and smack their head and have blood everywhere, and to have it happen every day. And to not be able to breathe while that's happening. You see, not all seizures are convulsions. Some are just electronic storms that turn off the electric, and you simply fall and you do not breathe. The device that's in his head has been a godsend, but it was caught up in the politics of the Obama administration, and we waited years to get it. We now have it, and it's wonderful, but the body does reject these devices. They sometimes will literally come back out, and the electrodes do corrode, and someday this device might not work. So, being that THC is an anti-inflammatory that is known to stop seizures, for example, Eric Clapton, the famous guitarist, is epileptic and has been using marijuana forever. It was only when he stopped using it that he started seizing. There's a lot of people like that. But we live in your community, and we need your help. I've asked Robin Voss. He told me I wasn't a legislator, so he wouldn't work with me. He's met my son. He knows our journey. I've asked Van Weingard, same thing, no help. We were delivered a CBD oil law twice. It's a complete failure. It requires you to commit a felony. It's not a problem anymore because the FDA has approved CBD drugs through the FDA. I'd like to see marijuana be an option, and I don't think that a male should have to worry about being imprisoned over it. They ought to be able to talk to their pharmacist and their doctor about it. It shouldn't be a felony that stops them from getting another job. And I want to tell you that epilepsy is not an illness, it's a side effect of 50 separate known illnesses. It kills 50,000 people a year. That's more than breast cancer and gun violence combined.
Hi, thank you. Next is Susan Sheldon, then John Scott, then John Heckenley.
Susan Sheldon, 100 Exhibitor Court, Burlington, Wisconsin, and I'm in Tom Pringle's district. I'm speaking on 2 things, and the first one is short and sweet, fair maps. Such a simple request. fair, nonpartisan. Just let it happen, please. The other one is in support of the lady who just spoke. It's also in support of all the people who are in jail, in prison for marijuana. 12% of federal prisoners are marijuana-based prisoners. How many are in our state? 12, 15, 10? And at the cost of how much it costs every day for prisoners, we are really misplacing our money. We spend more money in Wisconsin on prisons than we do the UW system. If we could only possibly get rid of those 10 to 12%, free the marijuana, nonviolent criminals, what you call criminals, from the prison system, that would relieve the pressure, and perhaps we would not need that new prison that is going to cost, I'm not really sure exactly, $1 million a year for staffing and $300 million plus to build it. Also, we have to expand the medical marijuana law for people like the little boy down on Toit Road, not too far from where I live. We have to separate marijuana from the other hard drugs. We can't look at them the same way. They are not the same, and they don't even need to be treated the same. As far as the other drugs, please, I know at the county level we sort of dropped a little bit back on supporting some of our programs that help with the people that are addicted. We have to fight that on every level, but separate it off the marijuana. Please pass the marijuana resolution. Thank you.
John Scott, John Heckenlively, and then Jen Simpkins.
Hello, I'm John Scott. I live at 5333 Lathrop Avenue in Mount Pleasant, and I'm here to speak about the Fair Maps resolution. First of all, I want to stipulate that I think gerrymandering has been done by both major parties, but I think it's time to really take a look at it and make a change, and look to our neighbors in Iowa for nonpartisan involvement in creating maps in the future as we go ahead. I personally believe that my voting rights were taken away from me in part by the 2010 extreme gerrymander that took place. Well, that's the most recent one, but it's happened other times from other parties, and I agree with that. Now, but my real reason, besides my own rights being taken away and those of others, that I'm here is because I really fear at this day and age and things that are happening in this country and in this area, our state, for democracy. Now, my background is as a political science teacher of high school students and a school administrator. For years, I taught the principles of democracy to my students. And I gave them my own experience and my true belief that we live in a great country because we have a democracy. And one of those principles is that everybody's vote counts the same. Now, I promised my students that that's what they would have as they grew. And if they followed the rules and lived in our society, they would appreciate and contribute to society and have a right to be a part of society, a voting member of society, a full voting member of society. And I'm not seeing that happen. Now, I read a book recently. It's called How Democracies Die by two professors. They looked at different countries. They looked at Germany, they looked at Italy, they looked at, more recently, Venezuela, and they looked at Argentina, which were democracies and died. And the reason they died is because elected officials, from grassroots officials like yourselves to politicians at the national level, did not defend democratic principles when issues like the Fair Maps resolution came before them. And gradually, over time, democracy slipped away from those countries and they were left with totalitarianism and dictatorship, and people lost their democratic rights. So that's what I fear. Now, there are other countries, such as Sweden and Switzerland, where the people stood up to what became extremists. They didn't take them into their parties, and they defended democratic principles. And those countries remain democratic. So we have a choice in this country, and we have a choice in this county, and we have a choice in the state. Do we want people to have everybody's vote to count the same, as I promised my students, and we know democracy demands? Or do we allow it to change? The Fair Maps resolution will allow you the opportunity to strike a blow for democracy. Thank you.
John Hackenlively, Jen Simpkins, then Nathaniel Griswold.
John Heckenlively, 920 Main Street, so Mr. Dembski is my supervisor. I'm also, of course, a member of the Racine Unified Board of Education. I'm speaking as an individual, not as a board member, but as an elected official. Certainly, all the time we're faced with difficult choices about where we put resources, and certainly about if we only had the resources, wouldn't it be nice to do all sorts of things. And so just from the standpoint of, wouldn't it be fantastic if the state of Wisconsin had an additional $500 million in revenue that could support things like education and healthcare and new infrastructure for this state. That's all I'll say on that. But the big reason I support passing a referendum is it's a simple matter of democracy, which I think Mr. Scott was very eloquent about. It's about asking our constituents what they think. That's all this is. That's all this is asking the citizens of Racine County what they think about this particular issue. And I think it's valuable. I signed petitions for referendums I didn't believe in because I think that it's absolutely valuable to have the input of the public on important issues that come before us. I think this is obviously an important issue. I think it's valuable that the citizens of Racine County have the opportunity to state their opinion. And so I certainly hope that you will support putting the referendum on the ballot this month. Thanks.
Thank you. Then we have Jen Simpkins, Nathaniel Griswold, and Joel Jacobson.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your attention. My name is Jen Simpkins. I live at 3515 4 Mile Road in Caledonia. I'd just like to ask you guys to give full consideration to the cannabis referendum and that you do approve and put that on the ballot coming November. I want to remind you that this isn't a referendum on how you personally feel about cannabis, but just that it allows people in Racine County to tell you what they feel about it, and more importantly, to tell the state legislators where they're feeling about it. It's an issue that, you know, has had really dramatic turnaround in the last, 50 years, from being something that was completely illegal to something that's being legalized successfully in states. And, you know, a lot of just people personally are having experience from just health issues or something where they're trying it out and they're having success with it. And our legislators on a statewide level and a national level are not going to lead on this issue unless they know that they're safe and that they've got support of their constituents. And so this would allow us as Racine County to say, hey, this is where the constituents of Racine are on this issue, and we'd like your leadership to move forward on it. Personally, I've never used marijuana, but my father was diagnosed many years ago when I was a teenager with a really, really bad neck injury, and they could do surgery, but it was a new surgery, and honestly they said, give us a couple of years to practice so we don't kill you. In the interim, they offered him the opiates that have now caused the heroin and opiate epidemic. And for a couple years, he was pretty much just kind of catatonic person. We kind of, like, he was there, but he wasn't there. He switched over to using marijuana. His pain is controlled. He's a vibrant grandfather to my children, and he's had success in a way that a lot of people that continued opioids have lost their lives because of that initial use. So again, I'd just like to remind you that this is just to really hear the voices of people in Racine County and have your leadership inspire further leadership on this issue. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Nathaniel Griswold, and then Joel Jacobson.
I'm also here in support of the cannabis referendum, and I wanted to just voice my support for asking people what they think about this issue. I heard that also that there might be some edits or some deletions from the referendum tonight, and I want to make sure that we get as much information as we can from the public. And I'm here to ask you guys not to edit the referendum tonight, or to make sure that if you do, that it's for the better, and that we can get more information. And also for people who say that it doesn't matter what people think on the issue because it's something that's illegal at the federal level, it does matter. Practically, it does. I think that's just a kind of a ridiculous stance to take, in my opinion. So we should definitely do this, and we should get the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joel Jacobson and Mary Ann Stahl.
Joel Jacobson, 200 Peters Parkway, Burlington, Wisconsin. I believe Mr. Pringle is my supervisor here. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak. It has been 50, 60 years since the popularity of cannabis has come into vogue in the United States. And so now there are grandparents talking to their millennial grandchildren who have exposure to this. It's been debated countrywide, as we all know, California all the way to the East Coast. And I think that the residents of Racine know enough now to be able to voice their opinion on what is appropriate and to give a legislative, again, this is, as has been mentioned, this is advisory, this isn't law. This is advisory to our state legislature. So I strongly encourage the vote of the board tonight for the cannabis referendum that the residents of Racine County get to speak. The second is related to fair maps, and that is that in the last 3 elections, 2012, 52% were not for Republicans. It was for Democratic voters. And we are ending up with legislatures that are 60% on the Republican side, and of course the converse for the Democratic side. But the popular vote of the state doesn't reflect that. So I strongly encourage, and as John eloquently mentioned, that Iowa model, where it's fair to both parties, that on our reflection of our vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary Ann Stahl and then Kaylee McGee.
I'm Mary Ann Stouby from Kansasville, and I'm here to support the nonpartisan bill for redistricting. No one's vote should be gerrymandered away by any partisan group, Republican or Democrat. As an educator of 34 years, I can feel what Mr. Scott was speaking of, about speaking to my students. I have strongly emphasized to them the validity and the importance of their vote and the necessity of it. But in recent years in Wisconsin, I have misinformed them. In fact, I've just downright lied to them when I told them their vote counted. Some of them may have, but some of them didn't. And that's a difficult position to be in as an educator, speaking to young minds about our democracy. So I strongly encourage you to support the nonpartisan redistricting efforts that are being put forward. I'm also in favor of our other referendums, where we are asking the voters of Racine County to weigh in on the legalizing the use of medical marijuana. The more the general population has a direct voice on the issues, the stronger our democracy will be. And so I encourage you to put that on the ballot in November so that people can express their opinion, pro or con.
Thank you. Kaylee McGee and then Emily Masters.
Hi, I'm Kaylee McGee. I'm at 3105 95th in Sturman. I'm here tonight to speak kind of on both issues I think that most of us are here to speak about. First, I think just plainly I want to say that gerrymandering is a stain on democracy regardless of what side of the aisle it's coming on. It's really hard to get young people to feel like they want to vote, to feel like they want to get involved. especially with how negative politics is at all levels right now. It's really hard to get young people involved. And then if on top of it, they feel like their vote's not going to matter, it's even harder, which is really unfortunate because we're going to end up with worse turnout all the time, and that's not what any of us should be striving for. And then secondly, on the cannabis resolution, I think that any question, no matter what it is, no matter how you feel about it, yes or no, pro or con, I think questions on the ballot are always a good thing, kind of what other people have spoken to tonight. It's always good to be able to voice your actual opinion on a very specific question, especially if there's 3 separate specific questions. I think that's really valuable and something we don't really get to do very often. And I think that probably anyone who doesn't want this on the ballot is probably just scared that people actually support this now, which to me is saying that you don't want to support your constituents, which is the opposite of what you're here to do. So, thanks.
Thank you. Emily Masters and Joshua Olivars.
Emily Masters, 12th Avenue, Union Grove. I'm here for the approval of medical and recreational marijuana. I suffer from bipolar, social phobia, a few other mental illnesses I have since I was young. I have been on almost everything you can think of for medication-wise. Nothing ever worked without side effects. Bad migraines, like debilitating. Nystagmus, where my eyes would go back and forth. I've had where I can't sleep at night. I've had medications that made me suicidal. They have tried everything. I've been hospitalized 5 times. I was somebody who was extremely against marijuana growing up. I just never seen it. I didn't know anything about it. Everything I heard, it was wrong. It was a drug. When I was 22, I found out what it was like. I tried it. It's the only thing that I can manage on my own without having to take extra. My pills, on days that I feel good, I can't manage it, I have to take it. With marijuana, I can dose myself. I know exactly how much I need. I don't have to, if good days, I don't need any. Bad days, I might need some. It's something that kicks in fast. It helps me. It helps suicidal thoughts when I have them. It helps anger and rage. It kills it. I'm more functional. I'm more social. I get out. I don't hide in my house. I sat on my couch for 2 years. From being like paralysis, I couldn't go to the store. I couldn't leave my home. I feel like it's really important to have that as an option when all the other options that you have don't work anymore. And when there's something you know that's going to work for you and has worked for you, I would just like to personally have that as an option, knowing that it works and it's safe. It's something that I feel comfortable doing, knowing that it's private, it's in my home. I know nothing bad will happen to me. I also have my stepfather right now who is being put into a coma, I think today, due to complications from cancer. He used to smoke. He can no longer do that because they will deny him treatment if he comes up positive. So he doesn't eat. He is shriveled down into nothing. And I would like that as an option for him, to have that as an option of a medication. I don't think that somebody should be denied medical treatment because, they're finding a way to survive. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next we have Joshua Olivars and then Will Leverson.
Good evening. My name is Joshua Oliveris. I'm from 640 12th Avenue, Union Grove. I'm here to address the cannabis issue. We have to understand from an economic point of view and a judicial point of view that the recidivism rate for marijuana offenders is skyrocketing. And while in the near future, Michigan and Illinois are both recreationalizing, we're caught in the crossfire, which means more people going to jail, more of our people paying more taxes to house more inmates. And on a medical level, it's helping children. I mean, children are getting off chemo and using 1,000 milligrams of THC, and a year later they're fine, instead of frying themselves with chemo. I mean, I think we should have a choice where all these other economies are flourishing, like Colorado's building schools and parks and taking care of their people because of medical and recreational use. We have an epidemic of heroin and all these other opioids. Why not give people marijuana? Why not give people CBD? There's a solution. People are dying out there. I've never heard of anybody dying from smoking marijuana. You know? I thank you guys for listening to my views, and I hope this is on the ballot in November, because I believe that we as Americans should have a choice in what we do with our lives. Thank you.
Next I have Will Leverson and then Ken Younger.
Good evening. Will Leverson, 1821 Roosevelt. I believe Mr. Nielsen is my supervisor. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. I don't mean to shift gears a bit, but this is something that's near and dear to my heart. A few of the supervisors on the board know how I feel. I think it would be in our best interest as a county from each municipality represented here today to make a commitment today to supportive services and mental health in our county. Many of the sort of comments that we hear tonight come from folks who had to find ways to self-medicate, to find other ways around some of the roadblocks that we currently have, because we don't, we may have discretionary funding and we may have trickle-down funding, but we don't have a commitment from every municipality to support our county supportive services. It shouldn't come heavily from Racine because it has a population density. It should come from all of us who hold these things near and dear to us. There was once a comment about another piece of public infrastructure, our KRM rail, and it came down from our governor that we had to find a more regional solution to that. Well, I think that the sweat of our brow and the conviction of our efforts, that we can actually do that here in Racine County for our people here. We can't speak for Rhinelander, and we can't speak for Eau Claire, but we have a different sort of dynamic here in Racine, Wisconsin, and we have to. Some man think he does. That's just, it's not dogmatic, it's just the way that it is. And if we plan for this to support our people, we won't have some of the conditions that we have with our shelters. We won't have issues when it comes to accessibility to supportive services. Maybe if we have true alternatives to any sort of medication, maybe if it's something like our county can support service animals or that sort of thing with a commitment from us all and not relying on some system that we all know can't really address the need. So I thank you all for your time, and I hope that your conviction of your hearts finds a way into policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm assuming you mean Jorgen.
Well,
although I am getting older.
I could hand it to my teacher to have to read the name. Supervisor Miller was my teacher.
Anyway, I'm sure there's strong feelings on this cannabis issue, and I'm sure many of you have gotten your ears bent over the last couple of weeks about this issue. I'm going to read a couple of quotes to you from a man by the name of Harry Anslinger, who was America's first drug czar from 1930 until 1962. Quote, "Marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. You smoke a joint and you're likely to kill your brother." Or compare that to this, quote, "Marijuana causes pacifism and communist brainwashing," unquote. It seems that Anslinger felt that marijuana could be the cause of dramatically different results, depending on his purpose of the moment. Here's another one for you. "Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men." Or the primary reason to outlaw marijuana is its effect on the degenerate races. This is a man who had direct and substantial influence on public policy. He laid the groundwork for the DEA and was the architect of the war on drugs. There is strong evidence that Anslinger actually saw the claims against cannabis as absurd fallacy, but used them to broaden the authority and reach of his fledgling agency. Now let's move forward to John Ehrlichman, who was Chief of Domestic Affairs for President Richard Nixon. This was a quote to a man who was writing an article for, I believe it was Salon magazine. Ehrlichman says, "You want to know what this was really all about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left, and the black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black, but getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. Now, some have said that Ehrlichman was just kidding when he said those things, but isn't it strange that exactly what he said is what came to fruition? Now I'll read you something by Cyrus Vance, who is the Manhattan District Attorney. This is probably the most remarkable public statement by a law enforcement agent or officer that I've ever heard. He said this on July 21st of this year, 31st, excuse me. Tomorrow, our office will exit a system wherein smoking a joint can ruin your job, your college application, or your immigration status, but our advocacy will continue. I urge New York lawmakers to legalize and regulate marijuana once and for all. The needless criminalization of pot smoking frustrates this core mission, so we are removing ourselves from the equation. Our research has found virtually no public safety rationale for the ongoing arrest and prosecution of marijuana smoking, and no moral justification for the intolerable racial disparities that underlie enforcement.
Your time is up.
Please vote for the referendum.
Next, we have Mark Kinzelman and Trioyo Fetchner.
Hello, my name is Mark Kinzelman. I live at 1022 Villa Street, Racine, and Mr. Densky is my representative. I'd like to be brief. Other people have spoken better than I can speak. I'm in favor of both the resolutions to
Thank you. Trioyo Fletchner, then Danny Connor.
Hello, my name is Troy Feckner, 2816 Carpenter Avenue. I'd just like you to vote yes and approve marijuana on the referendum for November, because this is a civil rights issue for the people, and to know what their opinion is. We need to ask the people. Another quote for you. I know you just got a couple, but here's George Washington: make use of the indica hemp plant and sow it everywhere. And we did just that for longer than marijuana has been illegal in our country. It's proven to be useful as hemp industrially, CBD and THC medicinally, and recreationally. It should be approved as well. Economically, it just makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny Connor, then Brian Stevenson.
Good evening. My name is Danny Connors. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. Advisory referendums in Wisconsin Supreme Court Mount Horeb decision. The court stated that it is primarily intended to provide one permissible means for expanding opportunities for direct public participation in local government through advisory popular referendums while respecting the constitutional requirement for representative government and legislative established decision-making structure for the city, village government in Wisconsin. This is a reminder we need to repeat to board members who do not think advisory referendums are appropriate. They're exactly what the court recognizes as a vehicle to increase voter participation without usurping legislative authority of local governing bodies. This is not, I say again, this is not about your personal views on cannabis, but to give the people that you represent a choice. We have been to 6 different counties since our yes vote in Dane County on July 12th. A total of 8 road trips, about 2,500 miles. We have heard so many truly amazing stories. On 8/21, me and my fellow Madison Normal member traveled just over 400 miles that day. From Madison to Antigua, been to Crandon. As you may know, 5 of the 6 resolutions that day were put to referendum. That's historic. Now we are here today to support Racine County. All of the state's eyes are on Racine County today. We the people are watching. Be one of the courageous 15 and become part of history. I thank the board for their time.
Thank you. Ryan Simonson and Kim Mahoney.
Hi guys, my name is Brian Simonson. My address is 1324 Prairie Village Road, and I'm from Deerfield. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up here and speak. This is actually my 8th county board meeting that I've been to. I would hope that you guys would support this. I have actually been affected by the opiate and heroin crisis in a couple different ways with my family. In 2011, I woke up and I found my 2-year-old son passed away in his bed. He actually died of a fentanyl overdose. I took him to visit my grandmother at a nursing home, and they were not disposing of fentanyl patches properly. One got transferred to our home that evening. He put it in his mouth, and the medical examiner said that it took minutes for him to pass away. My grandmother was actually taken off the fentanyl patch less than a couple weeks after my son passed away because she was being overprescribed too strong of a narcotic. It was not necessary for her to even be on something like that. Within 3 months of my son passing away, I was put on 9 different pharmaceuticals, 31 pills a day. For 5 years, I lived my life in a opiate-induced pharmaceutical haze where I was suicidal. I didn't care about anything. I thought my life was over. It totally changed my perspective and my mind on top of the various side effects from all the pharmaceuticals. After 5 years of living my life just absolutely miserable, it actually led me to a heroin addiction. I lived that for over a year. My family had no idea. I was so tolerant to these medications that it was just jumping to one so I could live and just be sick and not be a functioning addict. For a long time, I actually thought this is the way my life's supposed to be. My son passed away. I should feel this miserable for the rest of my life. That's what all these pharmaceuticals made me believe. On July 4th last year, I put myself in the hospital. I went to my wife. I had no idea she was going to leave me. I have 5-year-old twins. I own a successful landscaping company. My wife had no idea what I was doing. I said, I need some help. I went into the hospital. I withdrew off the medications in 5 days. While I was in the hospital, I saw some research on PTSD, how cannabis has helped that. And on top of that, as I researched it more, there were studies of anxiety, depression, pain, sleep. For 5 years, my wife would wake me up once a week, and I would be in a complete sweat, terror, traumatized, reliving the moment of finding my son dead in his bed. And if you can imagine doing that once, try doing that once a week for 5 years. I tried multiple pharmaceuticals. Since I have been on cannabis, I have not, in 1 year, had one PTSD episode. I have not taken one pharmaceutical. Us Wisconsinites are sick and tired of being forced dangerous, addicting, and potential deadly pharmaceuticals. I urge you to pass this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Kim Mahoney, then David Galbraith.
Sorry, too short. Kim Mahoney, 10640 South Prairie View Drive, Mount Pleasant. Just yesterday, some of you may have seen that a panel of 3 judges again declared North Carolina's congressional district map to be unconstitutional, ruling that it was gerrymandered to unfairly favor Republican candidates. The 3 judges had ruled unanimously in January that the state's House map violated the First and 14th Amendments by unfairly giving one group of voters, Republicans, a bigger voice than others in choosing representatives. In a lengthy ruling yesterday, the panel reached largely the same conclusion that it had in January. And I'm sure most of you are aware that in November of 2016, federal judges struck down Wisconsin's Republican-drawn legislative districts as unconstitutional. Here in Racine and Kenosha, we saw a huge impact from redistricting. One excuse I've heard for this obvious and blatant example of voter fraud is that Democrats have done the same thing.
So instead of fixing the problem so that all voters are equally represented, the Republican majority has taken the abuse to new and extreme levels. I applaud the Racine County Government Services Committee for proposing Resolution 2018-46, which would send a message to our state legislature that Racine County wants to restore integrity in our elections and to ensure all voters in the state of Wisconsin are equally represented. Please vote to approve the resolution. I also wanted to share my support for Resolution 2018-47 as written. I am hopeful that Wisconsin residents suffering from various illnesses will soon benefit from proven medicinal uses of cannabis without fear of prosecution for using the substance illegally. But I also support the other parts of the resolution. Please vote to approve the resolution in its entirety and let voters decide if this is something they want. Last, I wanted to update you on the status of our property located in Area 1 of the Foxconn development. It appears that my husband, my daughter, and I are the very last holdouts in Area 1, now that the Village of Mount Pleasant has moved forward with jurisdictional offers against two of its residents, forcing them to sell their property to the village on its terms. For one property owner, the village claims it needs their entire property for the road project. That's a lie. The truth is, the village only needs part of their front yard, but it has abused its power and fraudulently taken their entire property so it can give it to Foxconn. And Racine County is helping them do it by financing the purchase of some of the property. For that, you should be ashamed. Perhaps your next advisory to the legislature can be to strengthen our state's eminent domain laws to prevent municipalities from ignoring the law, manufacturing so-called blight, bullying and intimidating its residents, and violating our Fifth Amendment rights for the benefit of wealthy corporations. Thank you.
Okay, next I have David Galbraiths and then Diane Lang.
Good evening. Last year, I board member Maldonado put the cannabis reform, cannabis criminalization petition here in Racine, City of Racine. It led to over 5,200 signatures, showing the will of the people of the City of Racine. We've stood here today again to ask the county now, can you at least put this on the ballot? During this time, I kept it a secret even from Maldonado as well, for fear of retribution on my own family, because some of them are against cannabis in the first place. But my great aunt was dying of cancer. Her daughter came to me knowing that I was part of this organization, asking me if I could do anything to help. She specifically asked for CBD, which, while the state had legalized it, had made it almost impossible to actually get. The only CBD that was available anywhere in the city or even in the state is stuff that was legally allowed by the federal government, but was too weak to actually do anything. And so I had went on a search to find it through alternative means. By the time I found it, it was too late. The guy had contacted, got it to me 3 days after she died. That's all.
Thank you. Next, I have Diane Lang and Corey Prince.
Hi, Diane Lang, 2908 Ruby Avenue. Thank you, Supervisor Osterman, for returning my phone call regarding tonight's meeting. I'm here speaking on two things. One is that 98 years ago, in August of 1920, the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote passed. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act passed that prohibited discriminatory voting laws based on language or race. I'm here tonight because I think gerrymandering is undermining our democracy. The packing and cracking that is going on in districts so that it ensures one outcome and really gives an unfair advantage to certain candidates, I think is undermining my ability to have my vote count. I hope that you, as our elected representatives, will help us safeguard our right to choose our representation and decrease the polarization that's going on in our country. The second item I wanted to speak about was the advisory referendum coming before you tonight, 2018-47. And I wanted to approach it. I think you've heard some really strong personal courage stories tonight as to why medical marijuana would be good for it being approved. And I think you've heard that it's not your decision that it's good policy or bad, it's just you're making a decision, we should be able to weigh in on it. So I wanted to say that. But I was also, from having been on the county board, I realized financial considerations are a big part of what you have to do. And so I wanted to call your attention to the Forbes magazine article that was just recently published. It's this year, it's very current. And they talked about the reasons why we should be legalizing, taxing, and regulating medical marijuana. Right now, you may not be aware, but all 3 of our neighbor states have passed medical marijuana. Illinois, Michigan, and Minnesota have joined the growing ranks of states in our country that are getting a very substantial taxation return because of this. I brought along a map from the state of Colorado, and if you just Google what's happening with taxes on medical marijuana, you will get all these maps popping up. So Colorado, just for one example, happens to be one I follow because my son lives out there. In 2014, their first return was about $4 million on their tax revenue. In 2018, it was up to $25 million. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Corey Prince and Jay Warner.
Corey Prince, Center Street, Racine, Wisconsin. Nationwide, African Americans are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession. In the state of Wisconsin, it's 10 times more likely. We live in the 4th worst city for African Americans in the United States of America, according to the USA Today. With that being said, I don't understand how marijuana usage is almost equal amongst African Americans and whites in the United States of America, 12% for whites and 14% for African Americans. However, African Americans are 10 times more likely to be arrested in the state of Wisconsin. It's safe to say that those factors, amongst many others, contribute to the reason why Racine, Wisconsin is listed as the 4th worst city for African Americans in the country. It's safe to say that that is the reason why we have Fortune 500 companies right here in the city of Racine, but the wealth gap is 60% to 100%. 60 cents for every dollar is what African Americans make. And I'm sure that the arrest of minuscule and minor amounts of marijuana, the criminalization perpetrated on African Americans consistently and constantly in this county and in this city contribute to those factors. The Voting Rights Act of 1964 was passed and Jim Crow was supposed to be eliminated. However, the state of Wisconsin has definitely created a new Jim Crow in the state of Wisconsin prison system. Wisconsin leads the nation in incarcerating African American males. A zip code 30 minutes away, 53206, is the highest incarcerated zip code in the United States of America for African American males. It's sickening and it's sad. And you have an opportunity to do something about it. You have an opportunity to empower the people to choose, to decide that we're tired of the laws being one-sided, 10 times more likely. Please allow that to burn into your psyche. The numbers are equal, 12% to 14%. It equates to 28 million white people opposed to 5.6 million African Americans. However, we're 10 times more likely to be arrested. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Jay Warner and Christina Sina.
Eric J. Warner, 333 Lake Avenue, Racine. Resolution 2018-47 proposes to put on the ballot the advisory. Does the public want to have medical marijuana and other details? I'm sure you all know how much nonviolent crime, or more correctly, the treatment, the arrest, incarceration, and other dealings with nonviolent crime costs the county of Racine. I think it is high time for the public, which also knows these numbers pretty darn well, to have the opportunity to say, we would rather you spend the money on all of this arrest and judicial activities and incarceration. We would rather you spend the money on this than on education or something else. I don't think that our constituents would say that. By putting this referendum on the ballot, you have an opportunity to find out if I'm right or wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christina Seaman, then Eric Marsh.
Hi guys. As a 33-year-old, I have fibromyalgia. I have 2 college degrees. I cannot use my college degrees for the safety of special ed kids or for the safety of my patients, but I don't qualify for disability. Those people that, according to Social Security, they say I can still take care of people who depend on me. But yet, at 33, I have blacked out and fallen down my stairs in my home. At 33, I have been found unresponsive, laying on the floor in the hospital. But they want me to be in the hospital as a nurse, taking care of patients. That could be any of you guys that I'm responsible for in the hospital. It could be your family, your friends. It could be anybody. But, sorry, in order to even be up here, I had to take 5 pills to be up here today to talk. I took 1 sitting here. This is really hard. Also, the marijuana can help not only me, it can help people I know. My best friend passed away from a heroin overdose May 10th, 2018. His 18-year-old daughter found him in his car. If he was allowed to smoke, he wouldn't have been doing heroin. His doctor prescribed him the medicine that killed him, but he was shooting it up. If he was allowed to smoke heroin, if he was allowed to smoke pot, I'm sorry, if he was allowed to smoke it because of his job, he couldn't, because it would have been in his system. So he decided to take a different way to relieve his pain. So with all of that being said, please just think of the future. Think of the people that this is going to be helping. Don't go changing the words on the referendums, because you got to think about the 18-year-olds that are going to be voting in November. Think about your parents, that if you have an 18-year-old looking at the ballot like, what is this? No, I'm not going to vote for it because I don't know what you're talking about. Think about that. Would you guys want somebody who can black out taking care of your parents? I am a homeowner in Racine, but yet I'm lucky to work 5 hours a week right now. But yet I still have to manage my mortgage, my property taxes, and everything else. But it's all good according to Social Security. But when I was in Colorado, I did my marijuana. I had no pain. I was able to do what I needed to do in life. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric Marsh, then Eric Sewell.
Hello, I'm Eric Marsh. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I represent the Southeastern Wisconsin chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. And we want to make sure that the public officials in Wisconsin know where the people stand on this important issue. We just saw last week that 61% of Wisconsinites support the legalization of marijuana in Wisconsin, according to the Marquette poll. And 30 states in America have medical cannabis, 9 allow recreational, and our neighbor of Michigan is going to be going recreational soon, which means that cannabis is going to be even more accessible and cheaper than it already is. And as a lot of you probably know, it's already extremely accessible. And basically, we want to make sure that even though 61% of Wisconsinites support it, we keep getting ignored by the politicians. It's easy for them to say that, oh, their constituents don't support it, that's people in other parts of the states. Well, when we have it on the ballot, we're able to show each of these different representatives precisely the number of people who support it in their districts, and they won't be able to ignore the will of the people anymore. And states that have medical cannabis have seen a 25% reduction in opiate overdose deaths. There were just 8 overdoses in Madison just this past weekend because of heroin that was laced with fentanyl. And with 865 people dying from opiate overdose deaths in Wisconsin in 2016, that would save over 200 lives every single year by legalizing medicinal cannabis. In addition, in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, teen use of cannabis and other drugs has actually gone down a little bit since legalization, because now the people who are selling cannabis are now checking IDs in their regulated businesses, not black market dealers, and because the gateway effect from cannabis, as they like to call it, is because of the illegality, not because of anything inherent in cannabis. It's not any more likely to make you want to try harder drugs than caffeine or alcohol or any other substance. It's the fact that when you go to buy cannabis from a black market dealer, they're also selling harder drugs as well, and they're going to be pushing those onto you. You disrupt that pathway by taking it out of the black market and bringing it into the legal market. And so I encourage you to vote in favor of this referendum being on the ballot, so we can see exactly where the people of Wisconsin stand, so that Racine can be the 15th county to have this on the ballot and have close to 50% of the population be voting on this. And I also want to speak in support of the Fair Maps resolution, because if we had fair maps, then the representatives would be more accountable to the people, and we wouldn't have to be begging them for support for something that has support from 61% of the population already. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Eric Sewell next, and then Mary McElvain.
Good evening, I'm Deacon Eric Sewell from St. Lucy's and St. Sebastian's Parish. I live at 1030 North Sunny Slope Drive in Mount Pleasant. I'm against the legalization. I've looked at what has been mentioned many times here, the Colorado experience, and looked at the statistics of what actually has happened. All right, first of all, you got to remember that the marijuana nowadays is not your father's and your grandfather's. Your father and grandfather had 3% THC levels in them. Now in Colorado, they measured at 18.5, and in some cases it gets up to 31%, 10 times what your previous generations experienced. We talked about decriminalization. It has now worked in Colorado. All right, felony cases in Colorado have risen from 570 to 901. So, wow, how can it be all these cases? Because if you carry more than 10 grams, it's a felony. So they have almost doubled the amount of felony cases they have. The majority of DUIs in Colorado are now with marijuana. There's been a 32% increase in traffic fatalities from 627 to 880. The use of marijuana has not stemmed opiate deaths at all. Matter of fact, Colorado passed medical marijuana in the year 2000, all right? They have risen from the year 2000 from 110 to, in 2014, they had 536. So they've had a 5-time increase, and the legalization of marijuana did nothing to slow that down. All right, marijuana-related emergency room visits have increased. All right, marijuana only, from 8,197 in 2011 to now 18,255 in 2014. All right, more than doubled emergency room visits with marijuana. The Poison Control Center calls regarding marijuana have risen 210%. 28% of low-level income pregnant women now test positive for THC in their system. There are more marijuana stores than Starbucks and McDonald's included together in Colorado. And most of these, where are they located? In the poor Black and Latino neighborhoods. That's where they are. Talk about black market activity. Black market activity has not decreased because of legislation. It's actually increased. And a lot of it is exporting it to other states. And Colorado has experienced a lot of corruption charges against the regulators and public officials.
Thank you. Mary McElvain and Rachel Stedell.
Good evening, I'm Mary McElvain. I live at 1022 Willow Street in the city of Racine, and I'm represented by Nick Dembski. Would like to speak out again in favor of fair election map, Resolution 2018-46. We need to have a fair, transparent map drawing process for legislative and congressional elections. When our state government works better for us, we all win. I would also like to add that it is, in my opinion, time to have an advisory referendum on the legalization of marijuana. I think there are a lot of compelling arguments that I have heard, and it seems like something that people are really in support of. So thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Stedell, and then Ron Ballard.
Hi. Basically, I think the time for cannabis reform is now. 14 of Wisconsin's 72 counties will ask their residents about cannabis this November. You can too. Through referendum, the board can learn what the people of this county think about cannabis legalization. Cannabis prohibition is not working, and it will only continue to fail. Cannabis is in every community. It is now more popular than ever. Regulation and taxation are much more reasonable alternatives to what we have now. Another attitude that is not working is ignoring cannabis for medicine. Before prohibition, cannabis was used to treat many common ailments. We are holding people back from living full lives by not doing enough research on safer medication. In the 1990s, research discovered cannabinoid receptors in the human brain and body. Since then, it has been found that endocannabinoids help regulate neuron function, meaning they help the brain work better. We also know that endocannabinoid receptors are not dense in the medulla, meaning cannabis won't shut down the heart and lungs like hard drugs and alcohol do. We just had a fentanyl overdose outbreak in Madison, for example. There's also cannabinoid receptors in the body that help with appetite, pain, mood, and memory. There's growing support for cannabis in the media. Dr. Sanjay Gupta wrote an article named "Why I Changed My Mind on Weed." He notes that cannabis was used to treat neuropathic pain before cannabis prohibition, which opioids don't even work well on, and that in the United States, someone dies from a prescription drug overdose every 19 minutes. I don't understand why we would snub a plant that has great potential to help people heal and instead choose to rely on opioids and other medicines that cause more harm than good. I can't continue to let cannabis be used as a tool of institutionalized racism in society. This year, Time magazine published a special edition article called "Marijuana Goes Main Street." In it, they feature Dr. Gupta, and they also mention a Gallup poll from 2017 finds that 64% of Americans support cannabis legalization. In 2017, Colorado made $243 million in tax revenue from cannabis, African Americans and whites use cannabis at similar rates, but in the United States, African Americans are 4 times more likely to be charged with cannabis possession. Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Ballard, and then Patricia Hurley.
Thank you for hearing me this evening. I reside on 7405 Northwest Highway in Wannago. On both behalfs, these both need put on the ballot. Gerrymandering has been going on for about the last 40 years in our nation, and it's really become quite a mockery of justice in my eyes and many of my subordinates that I work with. At my age even, they're like, why go vote? It doesn't matter anymore. It's time that this changes. I've met many young individuals coming into my workforce that are in their mid-20s, mid-30s, and they don't want to vote anymore either. It doesn't matter. It does matter, and it's time that this comes onto the ballot. On behalf of medical marijuana, that also needs to be put onto the ballot to let the people speak. There are many tests that have been done back in the Nixon era that were squashed, and all the files were lost when Ford took office. Now those studies are in the number of over 22,000 worldwide. In Israel, they're doing great studies with it and finding the neuroreceptors of the cannabinoid system that we all harness in our bodies. So with that said, I don't want to beat the drum any harder. It's time that these both go onto the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia Hurley.
Good evening. I live at 5646 Rachel Glenn. I'm in District 15. I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago about how sick I am personally, and that if I don't receive medical marijuana soon, I'm at risk of having, I have diverticulitis. I have a lot of things wrong. But it's because I've never been a drug addict. I've never misused or abused drugs, ever. But I'm a victim of the opioid epidemic because in 2003, by the time I convinced doctors to take x-rays of my neck for my pain, that I was told I had permanent nerve damage, and if I didn't immediately have surgery on my neck, that I could lose the use of my left hand, and I'm left-handed, and a lot of other really bad things. My second opinion, they told me I could just go on pain pills and get spinal manipulation. So that's what I did. 3 years later, my son and only grandchild at the time were killed. And I went deeper into the, I guess, the opioid coma or whatever it was. I used to be a highly functioning adult until opioids. And then 3 years later, I had the Widowmaker heart attack. But in the meantime, opioids affect your respiratory system. I was put on a CPAP. Then in 2010, I had the Widowmaker heart attack, and I got 2 stents. I was awake during the whole thing with no anesthesia. And that was 2010, and then, I mean, I have 8 pre-existing conditions now. 6 are because of the opioids. I've been on pain pills for 15 years. In 2009, I decided I wanted this neck surgery because I wanted off of the opioids. I didn't like it. And I don't like drugs. I don't even like to drink. And so when I was, by the time they decided to do the surgery, I had an osteoarthritis system in the C2, C3 area. The surgeon, in March of 2010, I had surgery. He didn't take out the arthritic cyst, and then he told me that, oh, we need to go back in September and have another surgery. 2 months later, I had the widowmaker heart attack. I can't have any more surgeries, nothing, unless it is life-threatening. Cannabis is non-toxic. Cannabis is food and the most important medicine of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last communication I got was sent into the clerk's office. It's from Kurt S. Wallen, Chief of Police, retired from the city of Racine, and we'll have the Vice Chair read it.
August 27, 2019, Chairman Rusty Clark, Racine County Board. It has been brought to my attention that the Racine County Board is considering the legalization of marijuana use by adults for both medicinal and recreational purposes. As a former law enforcement executive in Racine County, I felt the need to comment on this matter. We seem to have forgotten that we are people who follow the rule of the law. This has been breaking down as of late, with states such as California, Washington, and Colorado leading the way. Either the U.S. federal government or the state of Wisconsin has legalized the use or possession of marijuana. How is it that our county government would make a ruling in opposition to them? Would this not open the door to similar rulings when future county leadership is in opposition to a particular state or federal law? Although I do not have any issue with using marijuana for medicinal purposes, I believe it to be a great mistake to legalize it for recreational use. Once marijuana is legalized for adults, its use among those under the age of 18 will increase dramatically. We will then see the effect on school attendance, school disciplinary problems, and juvenile arrests. Marginal students will most likely become users of marijuana, and this will further widen the achievement gap and diminish their opportunity for a productive life. Marijuana use will also increase driving under the influence-related accidents, including deaths, as drivers drive buzzed and mix marijuana with alcohol consumption. It will also have an impact on calls for service for police departments, most of which are already understaffed to meet today's needs. People will need to deal with more citizens who are under the influence of marijuana, and their impaired conduct will result in more arrests and incarcerations. Legalized marijuana will also affect our hospitals and cause an increase in the number of emergency room visits. I expect many who experiment with legalized marijuana will move on to designer drugs, cocaine or heroin. Most will also combine marijuana use with alcohol. I know that the counter argument is centered on our ability to make good choices for ourselves as adults. Many of our citizens do not make good choices with alcohol, cocaine, and even heroin, which is being used at epidemic levels. In any case, drug policy should be well thought out and based on facts and reliable data, which is certainly available from the state of Colorado. Please conduct a thorough review of some of the studies completed on the Colorado marijuana legalization experience before rushing to a decision to legalize it here. Upon conducting a thorough review, you will find that it was a bad decision for Colorado because of the very issues I have presented to you in this letter. Thank you for giving my letter consideration. Sincerely, Kurt S. Whalen, Chief of Police Racine, retired, City of Racine.
Next I have Lisa Bell and then Candy Feathers. Lisa Bell.
Good evening, board members. I'm Lisa Bell. I'm at 11918 4 Mile Road, and I believe Mr. Oh, he's my there he is my supervisor. I certainly have a great deal of sympathy for the people that have come up here with the problems that they believe medical marijuana will help. I personally have an autoimmune disease that is likely going to kill me one day. My legs bleed. I have nerve damage. My liver and kidneys are going on me. Our county clerk has actually witnessed once when I died and had to be brought back. None of these conditions will medical marijuana help, unfortunately. I also would like to relate a story. My sister-in-law lives in Astoria, Oregon, and probably within about 2 months after Oregon going legal, was hit head-on by someone high on marijuana who was in the wrong lane, coming around a curve, didn't see her, hit her head-on. Fortunately, she was in a newer vehicle, otherwise she would have been killed. It took her a year before she could walk. She still will never be able to walk right again. She used to be a hiker. That's in her past. I have a few statistics as well from Colorado. The number of drivers involved in fatal crashes in Colorado who tested positive for marijuana has risen sharply each year since 2013, more than doubling in that time. Federal and state data show. A Denver Post analysis of the data and coroner reports provides the most comprehensive look yet into whether roads in the state have become more dangerous since the drug's legalization. Increasingly potent levels of marijuana were found in positive testing drivers, kind of indicating they're not taking less, who died in crashes in Fort Range counties, according to coroner data compiled by the Denver Post. Nearly a dozen in 2016 had levels 5 times the amount allowed by law, and one was at 22 times the limit. Levels were not as elevated as in earlier years. I could go on, but basically the trends coincide with the legalization of recreational marijuana in Colorado that began with adult use in 2012, followed by sales in 2014. Colorado transportation and public safety officials, however, say the rising number of post-related cannot be definitely linked to legalize marijuana, but it seems kind of obvious. They are rising. In Colorado since 2013, are rising too quickly to ignore and highlight the potential dangers of mixing pot with driving. We went from 0 to 100, and we've been chasing it ever since, the Greenwood Police Chief said. It's a huge safety problem to legalize marijuana. I guess my point is that...
Yes.
Thank you.
Andy Salas, and then Pat McCartney.
Hi, I'm Candy Pettis from 101 East Market Street, Burlington, Wisconsin. I did not agree to do this referendum immediately or as of today to come up to the vote in November. The reason being it needs to be more structured. I don't disagree with the use of marijuana for medical reasons. I've had or experienced many people that went through cancer and chemotherapy and everything else everywhere from Atlanta, Georgia to North Carolina where I previously resided. And it did help them, and it helped them get past their issues with eating and nausea and everything else. It was illegal there in North Carolina hugely, and it was also illegal in Atlanta. I don't disagree with people smoking marijuana, but that's on their own cognizance. I do disagree with legalization of recreational using of marijuana. As a bartender, an experience of even trying to serve people and trying to figure out when they come in the door and waiting on them and they seem sober and fine, and you give them one beer or one shot or one of each, and they're practically falling on the floor or they're starting to fight because they're adding to whatever they smoke as a recreational purpose. The only thing I really highly think y'all should really need to structure this referendum, if you're going to pass the legalization of medical marijuana, not recreational in my opinion, I do believe highly that marijuana use should not be a felony at all. It should be a misdemeanor unless it's used in high or have high purchase of it and intent to sell. I don't agree with the majority of the people that came up and talked and gave examples of Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, and Colorado and California and how successful they are with what they gained and legalizing marijuana. They're all broke, or they're going to be broke. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Then Pat McCarthy.
Hello, my name is Patricia McGarity, and I live in Racine. Recently moved to the city of Racine. I think that we need to have a vote on marijuana. 2 years ago, my husband passed away. I have severe fibromyalgia. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I am 77 years old. I was on medication. Did me no good. Made it worse. Tore my body up. Tore up my kidneys. Tore up my pancreas. All right? I decided to get rid of all those medications. I decided to quit smoking 2 years ago. I went on CBD oil. I am functioning fine. I am not out to kill anybody. I'm not out to crash into anybody. I see what it does for people. And it has some damn good effects on people. This whole thing that, well, you know, they're going to get high. You know, don't let them have it. The THC, I'm tested, I go in for my blood work. I've never had anything go wrong with my blood work. I think it needs to be legalized medically, and I don't see a big reason for it not to be recreational. I'm not going to be smoking it, okay? I drive a motorhome. I drive across the country. I take CBD oil. I'm fine. So it's no big deal. I think that it needs to be put out there and let us vote on what we want. We pay the taxes. We hired you guys to do the jobs.
Thank you. Now the last person that has signed up, is there anybody wishing to speak this evening? Yeah. Please approach the podium, and you must fill out a slip for us after you speak. Please state your name and address.
I did fill one out, but I don't know what happened to it. Kelly Wishaw, 3312 Lathrop Avenue. I'm one of those evil people that has a fentanyl patch, the evil opiate. However, as you can see, I can speak clearly and I'm fine as long as you take it as prescribed. However, I would very much like to take something better that isn't as addictive and so forth and so on. And there's more to be examined besides marijuana that is out there, and there's a lot of research. I give tons and tons of stuff to my neurologist who would be more than happy to speak with all of you. And here's my issue with putting this referendum on the November ballot. Where are the statistics? Where are the doctor studies? Where is the proof, one side or the other? That is what citizens need to see and hear. There needs to be some kind of forum in the future, before you put this on the ballot, to show both sides of the issue and have everybody informed about it. I do not disagree that medical marijuana does help many people, including my aunt who suffers from seizures. It may very well help her. CBD oil, yes, helps me as well, but it does not have the THC factor, which makes you high. So there is a difference. So all I'm asking is that you guys just wait on this, put together a program, get everybody involved, put it in the paper, ask everybody to come and hear everything on both sides of the coin so people can make an educated decision. You know, this is kind of coming up going, well, you know, well, where are the studies? Who did the studies? Where is it coming from? Yes, we have statistics from here and there and everywhere, but we need it done here in Wisconsin by people who are knowledgeable, are doctors, are in the legal system themselves, like the Sheriff's Department. What are they concerned about? And that's all I'm asking, is that you just wait maybe till spring, but give the citizens of this county the option to hear all of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you please fill out another sheet?
I sure will.
I have no idea where it was.
No problem.
Is there anybody else wishing to speak? Please come forward.
I'm Larry Gerbil, I live on Savage Road, Union Grove. If this is something that gets on the ballot, will you people see that and give us enough information, both pro and con, so we are educated when we go in the voting booth so that we know whether to vote yay or nay?
Okay, thank you. Could you please fill out one of the sheets though? Next. Your name and address?
My name is Joseph Fish IV, 2923 Waterview Circle, Racine, Wisconsin. My father was the head of hunter safety and racing for a long time, worked as shooters, just died of cancer recently from working at the case plant, got some stuff. He started smoking weed shortly after. The chemo wasn't working, taking CBD and everything. He wanted it to be legal his whole entire life. The one thing that I didn't hear anybody point out that I thought should be pointed out was that marijuana stays in the system longer than any other drug out there. Stays in the system for approximately 30 days, which makes people that have to take drug tests for employment and stuff like that, it makes it so that they can't smoke marijuana because you can't get it out of your system. So all these other drugs that are allowed to do because it leaves the system in 3 or 4 days versus the 30 days that it takes for marijuana. So I think it's a target drug that has been used for many years to, you know, target drug users, offenders, whatever you want to call it. It said in the Bible that it was put here, God put it here, put herbs and plants for everybody to use. It's been put here by God. There is no reason why I think anything else, pills, all that other stuff should be allowed to be allowed to take, allowed to be taking those types of drugs versus something that you can go out and pick and grow and eat yourself, you know what I mean? That's all that I want to say was a 30-day thing.
Okay, thank you. And make sure you please fill out the sheet. Anybody else wishing to speak this evening? One more time, anybody else wishing to speak this evening? Not seeing any, I will close then the public comment period. I want to thank everybody for coming out, and please continue to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Medical purposes, allowing adults 21 years of age and older to engage in the personal use of marijuana, regulating commercial marijuana-related activities, and imposing a tax on the sale of marijuana.
Second. We have a motion by Supervisor Bernberg and a second.
Mr. Chairman?
I first have to go with Supervisor Bernberg.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make a statement.
Can you please use your
Oh,
microphone?
sorry. Sure. First of all, I would like to say that the Government Services Committee passed this resolution unanimously with one member absent. 19 people spoke in favor of medical marijuana and CBD, stating the benefits of anecdotal evidence, as we have also seen this evening. Secondly, it was suggested later that perhaps there should have been more diligence by the committee. My response to that, who needs due diligence in letting the voices of the people be heard? Yes, we are representatives of the people, but sometimes it is necessary for many more to be heard. Take time to listen to those whom you may not want to listen to. This referendum is not going to change legislation next year nor the year after. What this resolution does, in my mind, is to say to our legislators, look into this, study this, get all the facts, not just ones that defend your point of view, and then make an informed decision. I received a call from a constituent who was not happy with the decision made. He asked me why. I said that everyone has to be thoughtful, informed, and educated. He replied that it was not my job to educate. Then whose job is it to at least bring the suggestions? Perhaps now we would not have laws with unintended consequences because people did not educate themselves. This constituent also stated that there would be consequences for this vote. My reply is, that is what democracy is all about. Legalization is a complex issue with many variables. The criminalization of marijuana has been a political issue dating to the 1930s. The toll it has taken on our minority communities has been devastating. Blacks are incarcerated 3.7 to 4 or 5 times more than whites. The sentencing is extensive, and reintegrating to society has been more than difficult. And surveys say that there are an equal number of both races who engage in marijuana use. I hope, board members, that you have been able to go over the facts that I have presented. And I also made up a list if anyone would like this. To highlight a couple of things. Marijuana is, by the U.S. government, a Schedule I drug. What is a Schedule I drug? It has a high potential for abuse, but the outstanding thing is the drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical treatment use in the U.S. Well, the U.S. government has a patent on cannabis plant compounds covering the potential use of non-psychoactive cannabinoids. Also, the U.S. government owns 5 acres of land producing marijuana, and it supplies 4 people, and it used to be 15, but some have died, with at least 33 marijuana cigarettes a month. It has for over 30 years. So to say that it does not have any medicinal use, the U.S. government has admitted to it. When you have a chance, please read, on the bottom, there is research, I thought it was very extensive, by the AMA about consequences of marijuana in Colorado and Washington. It does talk It brought up some of the statistics that the people gave here tonight about accidents and whatever, but there are factors on alcohol also that should be looked at. On the last note, money is always important, and taxing cannabis would certainly help the coffers of the state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. Supervisor Osterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask that a potential substitute resolution be distributed at this time. I believe the clerk has the copies.
Okay. So are you offering this as an
I'm going
amendment?
to offer this as a substitute resolution. There are enough changes into it that it would not be an amendment, but a substitute resolution. And I'd like to give the board a moment to read through that, if I may, and have them make a motion to take out this substitute resolution.
Point of order.
Point of order. Point of order.
This is not on the agenda.
Is there a second?
It's an amendment. Or proposal.
This is the
There's a motion to amend, which can also take the form of a motion to substitute. That can advance at the same time simultaneous with the underlying motion, given that this is seeking more than minor changes to the underlying motion, to the underlying resolution. It is essentially a motion to substitute. That discussion can occur if there is support for that simultaneously with the underlying motion.
We do have a motion right now, but we do not have a second. We'll give everybody a minute to read this. It's just really one page.
Okay, this would be resolution number 2018-47S. Resolution by the Government Services Committee providing for an advisory referendum on the November 6, 2018 election ballot to measure public opinion on permitting use of marijuana for medical purposes, allowing adults 21 years of age and older to engage in the personal use of marijuana, regulating commercial marijuana-related activities, and imposing a tax on the sale of marijuana. To the honorable members of the Racine County Board of Supervisors, whereas criminalizing marijuana use has failed to curb its use, and whereas recent polls show a majority of Americans favor legalization of marijuana, and whereas 30 states have legalized medicinal marijuana, and whereas legalizing and taxing marijuana could lead to an increase in state and local revenue through sales and excise taxes, and whereas an estimate by the Congressional Research Service suggests that replacing marijuana prohibition with a system of taxation and regulation could yield $6.8 billion in federal excise taxes alone, and whereas Alaska, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington have legalized adult personal use of marijuana and regulate the production, distribution, and sale of marijuana, and Vermont and the District of Columbia legalized limited personal possession and cultivation of marijuana by adults. And now therefore be it resolved, the undersigned members recommend adoption of the following resolution: the Racine Board of Supervisors does resolve to conduct a countywide advisory referendum to be held with the November 2018 general election, that a concise statement of the questions are given and that the questions will state as follows. Question number 1, should marijuana be legalized for medicinal use? Question number 2, should marijuana be legalized and regulated for adults 21 years of age or older? Question number 3, should marijuana sales be taxed for state and local revenue? Be it further resolved that the Corporation Council prepare a notice of referendum to be published by the Racine County Clerk in accordance with statutory requirements, and be it still further resolved that this resolution and the referendum shall be filed with the Racine County Clerk no later than 70 days prior to the election at which the questions will appear on the ballot. And then it's just a signature page.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Supervisor Osterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this substitute resolution proposal. Look, we're all elected to create policy and practice
which represents what we perceive to be the will of our constituency. And most days, we're able to discern what that looks like by delving into our collective experiences, our shared experiences. But there are moments where it is incumbent upon us as representatives of our contemporaries to ask them exactly how they want to be represented in regards to a particular issue. It doesn't mean that we should govern by poll, and it does not mean that we're expected to survey the public with every single item that comes our way for dispensation. What it means is that we are expected to know the difference. I believe we should submit to advisory referendums when a major issue comes before us. Certainly, the original resolution 47 for this marijuana referendum makes very good points as to why legalization or decriminalization should be considered, and those are two very different concepts, by the way. But that's not what this referendum should be about. It should be only the basic question of if it should be legalized or decriminalized. The language contained in the original resolution, I feel, goes beyond that. It argues numerous points for legalization, even suggests limiting the use of the tax revenue that could be garnered from it. And that is a different debate for a different time. The substitute resolution I propose removes ancillary language and focuses on a few basic facts surrounding why we ask, what if? It's not to infer that this is not a complex issue. It certainly is. It's one of the most difficult and interesting issues that we will have to face sooner or later. It seems the entire country is dealing with these questions, and if it comes to that debate, I certainly welcome as much public input as we can possibly get. The beginning of our involvement with these questions starts here, with this resolution asking, again, what if? Please do not let this debate become what it is not. This is simply about asking a question. The substitute resolution does just that. It limits the debate to the task at hand, that of deciding whether or not we should ask those few simple questions. The entire legalization or decriminalization question is certainly a state and federal issue, but of course, as is our Racine County way, we will make our voice heard loud and clear when the time is at hand about how we, the voice of our constituents, feel about that larger issue. For now, this deliberation should only be to ask a question about asking a question. This referendum should discover the will of the people, the answer to the basic question, not argue the further initiative yet. I hope to have that referendum in the form that you now see before you. Thank you very much. I ask for your support.
So we're having discussion on 2018-47S. Supervisor Shakur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the people that spoke, the public that spoke in favor or that were opposed to resolution 2018-47. And of course, now what we have before us is 2018-47S. And I would really like to know what the committee feels about it, the chairperson, etc. But from what I'm seeing here, it looks to be pretty decent. But I'll just carry on with what I have to say here. It's highly of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is about listening, it's about learning, it's about dialogue, it's about debate and discussion. Billions of dollars are spent on all levels. That includes the health, spending on all levels of health with the families, issues with the relationships, the courts, the corrections, addiction. This is pretty much about fairness and listening to the people. The only thing we are doing here is to let the people have a voice. This has nothing to do with whether we support it, for or against it. Because of course there's more people, more players that come into play here, that is the state and also the federal government. So I would just like to say is that let the respectful dialogue, debate, discussion, and an exchange of ideas, the facts begin to flow. So I would encourage you to vote in favor of this referendum and start this most important initiative. Again, it's about debate, it's about the opinions, and this is just an advisory situation. So I would ask and encourage each and every one of us to support it. Whatever you think about it, us as individuals and elected officials, let us hear what our constituents have to say. Let us hear from all the wonderful Racine County, and then let's move accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also sit on the Government Services Committee. Unfortunately, I was out of town when they went through with this first resolution. I would not have supported it had I been there. I feel that Supervisor Osterman's substitute gets more to the point. Also helps me pretty much give me a better picture of what our constituents really want, and that is the three questions that are basically asked. I have had personal experience with medical marijuana in my family. My family strongly supports it. I would like to know how my constituents feel about it. I am old enough that I grew up with marijuana. I was part of the Vietnam experience. I would not support at this point, without more information, and whatever information I do have right now, I still can't support legalization of marijuana, just willy-nilly, point blank. So that's my personal feeling, and I know I've got to take that out of consideration a lot of times. So this substitute resolution gives me the opportunity to get a clearer picture of what our constituents really want. I don't think the original one does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the amendment? Not seeing any, then we'll do a roll call. Supervisor Hintz.
I'm sorry, I never hit my button.
Okay.
I agree with Mr. Osterman's. I agree with Mr. Osterman's agreement or revision. I believe it breaks down the questions that were in my mind as to how far is this going. I totally agree that legalized for medicinal uses is appropriate, but I also agree the next two might be questionable. So I would be in favor of the amendment. Thank you.
Okay. And I have Supervisor Bernberg.
Yes, just to clarify, this is concise. I believe the three questions are the same questions we had on the original resolution. The only, a couple of differences are we went into detail, or the resolution went into detail on why we were doing this. So as chairman, I can support this. To me, the questions are the same, are they not, as the original ones?
Supervisor Osman?
I will answer that. The language, the language that was removed from the original resolution were the references to the use of, well, yes, a lot of the arguments for legalization, decriminalization were removed, but in regards to the questions, the third question was basically changed. The references to the uses of those tax funds was removed. My feeling was it was too limiting, and having researched what happened in Colorado, they had a lot of issues with those restrictions. And so from our standpoint, keep it a little bit more wide open.
Okay. Then I have Supervisor Dembski. Oh, 1 second.
Yes. I just wanted to highlight there's one other slight difference in question number 2. Whereas the original resolution read, should marijuana be legalized, taxed, and regulated in the same manner as alcohol for adults 21 years of age or older, the passed resolution reads, should marijuana be legalized and regulated for adults 21 years of age or older? The reference to taxation follows in question number 3. So essentially, there's not a substantive difference in that regard, and I just want to highlight that minor difference.
Thank you. Supervisor Dembski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Maldonado and I were the ones who introduced this resolution of referendum originally, and while we submitted it with intention, so while this is not necessarily Supervisor Osterman's amendment is not necessarily what I am more in favor of, I think that it, at the very least, the questions that would be included on the referendum are intact enough with the original intent of the resolution and the referendum. And I just wanted to say out loud that I'll be in favor of it and I'll be willing to support it. Thank you.
Supervisor Kramer.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to state that at the committee meeting, I offered this very similar worded resolution by deleting some of the original resolution lines, and that parallel on 334. I'm encouraged to see that we are, question number 3 has been changed, because in my reading, when you earmark spending on a item, say anything, that tends to make the collection of passing further spending items on that difficult. So I look at this and I think Supervisor Osterman did a very admirable job.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question. My understanding of protocol would be that we have a motion to substitute this for the original one. And if we do that, it would then be back on the floor for discussion and a final vote. So merely voting in favor of the substitute does not pass it. That's my understanding, but I want to make sure everyone, well, I defer to the Corp Council, but I want to make sure everyone knows what we're doing.
Okay. So if I understand the question, Supervisor Miller, the question is just the vote that would next proceed, that's not on the substance and in favor of passage of the motion. Is that what you're getting at?
My understanding is that Supervisor Osterman moved to substitute this for the original. If that passes, then this substitute will be before the board for final disposition.
That is correct.
Anybody else?
I just don't, would we be passing it tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought the inference was that it would have to come before the board again. Thank you.
The only clarification that I'll offer is that if, when that does move toward a vote on the substance, if that fails, that because there would be original motion, well, in any event, there would be a vote following on the original motion as well.
Okay. Do you understand that? Okay. Supervisor Maldonado.
Thank you, Chair. So just to clarify, if the substitute passes, it will be on the ballot for November 6th.
No, first we're taking a look at it, whether or not to replace this resolution with the other resolution. And then we will vote on it again. So right now, we're just asking whether or not we are going to allow it to substitute the other one.
Okay. And would it affect the timeline?
No.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? This will be a roll call. So what we are doing here is voting on whether or not the substitute 2018-47S with the original resolution. voted, 14 yes to pass. So we have 2018-47S in front of us.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to adopt 2018-47S.
Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I would just reiterate my earlier points. This kind of creates a more evenly worded resolution, and I think it allows us to put the onus on the voting public, as they have asked for, to tell us exactly what they want on each of these questions. Thank you.
Anybody else? Supervisor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the supervisors who believe passionately in this issue. I certainly want to thank the citizens who came out and shared their stories this evening. I believe we are all supportive of people who could benefit from medicinal marijuana. My question is, how can we best help these people? It's really not a county issue. If we call for a referendum or not, if the referendum passes or not, and I think just based on polls, the referendum probably would pass, county government, through this process, can't change federal or state law. I support the position of the American Medical Association for more research on medicinal use of cannabis. I'm heartened by the experiments and approvals that show benefits for using this drug, but again, we have no authority on this matter. We should bring this issue to our legislators, and I ask you right now, Mr. Chairman, to put this on the agenda of our next scheduled meeting with our representatives from Madison and Washington. Mr. Chairman, in 2016, I proposed a referendum on selling Ridgewood Care Center. I did that because the people of Racine County owned Ridgewood. They kept it open with their tax money and patient payments. We, the county board, had full authority on that decision. In its wisdom, the county board voted 13-7 not to ask the people by a referendum whether to sell Ridgewood, and then the county board did sell it. Now we have a proposal for a referendum in which we have no authority. We cannot change these laws. It must be done in Madison and Washington. If we didn't have a referendum on an issue that we were the decision makers, namely Ridgewood, I really can't understand why we would have one on an issue that is not ours to decide. I have discussed this resolution with many constituents, and some of them think that if this goes on the ballot and is passed, it's going to become law. I think that is in a way misleading the public. I know that there are strong arguments for a referendum to show public opinion. But you know what? The legislature knows how the public feels. The Marquette poll just came out. It says that 61% of the people of Wisconsin want medical marijuana. So we don't need to do this. And I do fear that we're going down a path of getting involved in issues that we don't manage, we don't have the authority. We were elected to run the county board and county government, and there's plenty of things for us to do on that. If we're going to have a lot of other issues, I think we're betraying, I would feel that we're betraying our oath to run county government. And there's another issue with the city of Racine. As we know, the city council has already decided to have 4 marijuana questions on the ballot. This will add 3 to those city ballots. And, you know, citizens don't like when government do dumb things. And to add 3 more questions on marijuana to the city ballots for a total of 7, I think is plain dumb. For the supervisors who brought this issue to us, it is an important issue. To the citizens who spoke to us tonight, this is an important issue. Mr. Chairman, we should thank them for their input, but this is not our issue on which to act. Let's not go down the path of trying to do the work of Madison or Washington.
Thank you. Supervisor Bernberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Supervisor Miller, but I respectfully disagree with you. I think this is an issue that is pervasive over the United States, has been an issue for 60 or 70 years. And in that time, our legislators haven't been listening, and they put it to the side. So I think little by little, we need to bring it to their attention, and the more that it's brought to their attention, perhaps they will look at it and do something about it. Granted, yes, we cannot change the laws, but we can point out very vehemently the discrepancies in the legislation and the Schedule I drug classification for marijuana, and the hypocrisy of the United States in, giving marijuana to other people. We have to start somewhere, and I think that this is a time that we need to do. Thank you.
Supervisor Caprelli-Becker.
Thank you. Just a quick comment in regards to Supervisor Miller. It's not often that state government is touchable and reachable to the general public, but local government, such as ourselves, county officials, we're here, and our constituency base isn't as grand as a state representative. So I appreciate that we are hearing this issue from our constituents, and I am happy, and I can only speak for myself, but I'm happy that you're sharing a lot of your personal stories with me. I am honored, and I'd be more than happy to make sure that this message through my avenues, because I do have some connections with the state, and that I can share that message. And I'm sure the way that you feel, that oftentimes when another elected official can speak to another elected official, that they're often heard at a different level, and I'm happy to use that. Also, Supervisor Miller had mentioned the question about the city having now 7 questions on the ballot. That was brought up at Government Services Committee level, and Corporate Counsel did say there was a policy and procedure in place. However, I can't speak on that. Would Corporate Counsel be able to speak a little bit more in depth on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not necessarily that there's a policy in place, but the Wisconsin Elections Commission has weighed in on precisely this issue. As noted, the city of Racine has authorized an advisory referendum that poses 4 questions regarding legalization, decriminalization. The Elections Commission recognizes that in instances where voters are asked to vote twice on identical questions, once as a municipal referendum and once as a county referendum, that voter confusion may arise. The Commission further recognizes that voter confusion may also arise where, as would be the case here, there are similar but differently worded questions as separate municipal and county referendum, because voters are essentially forced to discern the significance of any variations between the 2 questions. What the Elections Commission recommends is that if a municipality has authorized an advisory referendum and then the county authorizes an advisory referendum on the same issue, that the city, or the municipality, the city in this instance, consider whether they want to take action to whether rescind or remove it to avoid that situation of voter confusion that could ensue. Given the late hour at which this is being considered by the county, it is literally the last day where the county could authorize a referendum question, and get it on the November 18th ballot. I can't speak to whether or not there's sufficient time. I'm not familiar enough with the city practice and whether that is feasible, but there likely would be communication between our clerk's office and the clerk's office's counterpart at the city, but whether or not that can actually occur in this short amount of time, I can't answer.
Thank you. I'm going to call on the county clerk then.
Under the Wisconsin Elections Commission calendar of election events, today is the last day that a governing body could take action to place a referendum question or questions on the November ballot, because those filings must be filed with the office of the county clerk on the 29th, which is tomorrow.
Thank you. Next call on.
Point of information,
Supervisor Miller.
Just a point of information.
Is the county clerk aware of if it would be possible for the city to do anything other than have their 4 questions at this point?
That I'm not certain. I have not been in contact with either the city clerk's office or anyone from their council. I believe I looked at their regular schedule, and under our booklet where we have a page that lists where the regular meetings of the municipalities, the dates of the month. It looks like their next meeting would not be until next Tuesday, which is September 4th. Ballots must be in the hands of the municipal clerks under federal guidelines 70 days prior to an election, meaning the clerks need to have printed ballots in their hands to send to absentee to voters that have absentee requests on file by September 19th.
Vice Chairman Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of mirror a lot of the issues that Supervisor Miller raised earlier. You can look at the board up here for clerk. There's a yes vote up there behind my name because I thought that Supervisor Osmond's proposal for the substitute language was superior to the original resolution. That being said, I don't agree that this is a county level issue. I listened to the committee chairwoman take aims for the comment that was made to her that more diligence was needed, followed by a comment that state legislatures need to listen to their constituents and do more research on this issue. But it comes to us tonight at the 11th hour. I appreciate everyone that came out this evening, everyone that spoke, their opinion, whether for or against a couple of resolutions that are before us this evening. But I think as a board, we should have been given more opportunity to do more due diligence, to become more informed, to get professional opinions to support any potential decisions coming down the road for other branches of government, state or federal. I think this is premature bringing this to a vote tonight, but it is in front of us. There was also a comment made by a number of supervisors that we represent our constituents, of which I represent the city of Racine, Caledonia, and Mount Pleasant in my district. The city of Racine has issues coming before them already on a referendum. Of my constituents that contacted me overwhelmingly against this. And they have asked me to vote against it. So when they see that yes vote was for a possible resolution that can go through and a better version of it, not the support of that. So when this comes up for vote, I will vote against it as a representative of my constituents. And I wish we had more time to look into this further and consider it further, because it does have potential ramifications going forward. That's all.
Thank you. Next I have Supervisor Shakur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must disagree somewhat with the supervisor of the 11th district. However, I have high respect for him, but I'd just like to say that this is a form of our voice, our vote, and what type of actions we would like to see. Now, from the state and federal levels, if we don't send some type of communications to them, They can impose anything on us, and what are we supposed to do, just sit by and say nothing? Now, if they cut revenue, are we to sit by and say nothing? If they put caps on us, are we to sit by and say nothing? If they impose laws and issues that we gotta follow and then we have to pay for them as local taxpayers, I think we need to let them know how we feel as a county. When they cut revenue, caps, what about the grants? Are we gonna sit back and just say nothing? Oh, they give us a grant. Oh, thank you, we got a grant from the state. Oh, thank you, we got a grant from the federal government. And the levy limits, do we say nothing about that? I mean, it's a bunch of things, health issues, it's wages. And as far as us having time, I think there's enough here. It's not perfect by any means, but I think we have a job to do when it comes in November. We have the opportunity to get all the questions, all the information, and get it all out there and get it aired out so we can deal with this. That's plenty of time. So I think we should move forward with this. And I tell you, I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but I am for, of the people, by the people, for the people, and listening to what they got to say and giving them that opportunity to speak. So with that, I think we should get on with it. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Baldonado.
Thank you. Just want to work it. Okay. So I just want to remind the board that I hear your argument about this is really fast. We just voted on Spoxcon to get passed through here, and that was billions of dollars. That also passed at the 11th hour. So I think it's only fair that we allow the people to vote and have their voices heard this November. I just want to give you all a little brief history about me before this board. In about October to December, I quit my job. I went to Standing Rock, North Dakota, to protest the Keystone Pipeline. I came back to Racine, got hired as a paralegal. I quit to essentially run the petitions to decriminalize cannabis here in the city of Racine because, as Corey Prince mentioned, and other people here, we have the highest incarceration rate in the nation, southeastern Wisconsin. I said here day one that I'm here to represent the people of color and people who are incarcerated, and I will be their voice, and the people who are also undocumented. So I am here again. This is the fourth time the city of Racine County has spoken for the decriminalization and/or legalization. As reference to this is not a county issue. Our legislators, like Supervisor Porter said, they're going to be needing information, right? Some legislators don't agree with some of the stuff that's going on in Colorado or whatever. When we, Racine County, say that we are for the decriminalization or legalization of cannabis, they have no other wiggle room to say that otherwise. And as far as the county issue, the city of Racine can change the forfeitures of what the city enforces. And I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, corporate counsel, about the county could also essentially change the forfeitures that we place at the county level, as terms as fines for 25 grams of cannabis or less.
Go ahead, corporate counsel.
So the county does have an ordinance that speaks to the issue like any other ordinance on the books, subject to potential revision or modification. In addition to the city, a number of other municipalities in Racine County have their own code or ordinance that speaks to citations on this matter as well. There's not total consistency throughout that. My office did start a review of that in recent months, but yeah, I just raised that there is some inconsistency, like any other ordinance, of course, is subject to modification with sufficient support.
Thank you. Supervisor Dembski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the supervisors who have spoken on this issue one way or the other. I really want to thank the people who have come out from the community and some who have come out despite struggles that could have kept you behind. So thank you to everyone for coming and sharing personal stories. I'll mainly just quickly speak to Supervisor Miller's concerns. Supervisor Miller said we should bring this issue to our legislators, which I absolutely agree with. But I think there aren't too many ways we could more appropriately bring this to our legislators than by putting the vote to the people on the ballot and letting them have their voice, be represented literally and quantified for our legislators to see. We already have data on the state of Wisconsin, but we don't have data on Racine County specifically. We're going to have, Vice Chairman Cook mentioned that he represents 3 municipalities as a county supervisor. I represent 2, so I'm going to have data on some of my constituents, the ones who live in the city of Racine. But my constituents who live in Mount Pleasant deserve to have their voice heard just as much as my constituents in Racine. And beyond that, I want to know what their voice, not only do they deserve having their voice heard, I deserve to know what their voice is. To represent them appropriately, would like to know what their voice is so that I'm not doing that in an imbalanced way. I know that Vice Chairman Cook also said you would like to have the board be more informed before making a decision like this. And of course, I agree, the more information all of us can have on any decision we're making, the better. But I think specifically what you're talking about, in my opinion, would be more appropriate if we were actually making a decision ourselves on legalizing medical marijuana or recreational marijuana, something like that. The way we get information in this case, the information that we're looking for, is the voice of our people, the people that we represent. So if we want to be more informed, then we vote this referendum through. Thank you very much.
Please, we're running a meeting here. It's not the Packer game. Supervisor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would really like to hear what law enforcement, the judicial system in this county, and the DA, I'd like to have them weigh in on this so we can make a decent decision. We've heard numerous people talk, in favor of this, but on the other side, I'd like to hear that also until I can get any kind of opinion from that.
The only remarks I have to that is that the committee never invited them to participate.
I was going to say I don't believe it was heard at the committee level. So that being said, I guess until I hear that side, I will not support it.
Supervisor Miller for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate my colleagues' comments. But it's interesting that we had a lot of input tonight on 2 issues. Before the board is a MAPS issue in which we state a position to the public. On the marijuana issue, we have a referendum. So there's 2 different approaches. Traditionally, we have done our position as a way to dialogue with our legislative leaders, and I think that's the better way to go. People actually seem to support both tonight, because one's just a statement of a position, the other is a call for a referendum. But I still believe that when it's not our business, we shouldn't be throwing it out to the public. Again, some of them are going to think that this is going to change the law.
Thank you. Supervisor Bernberg for the second time.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to address Supervisor Grove and the fact that we did not invite police, sheriff, whatever.
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought of it, but on the other hand, I do not expect our law enforcement to speak against the laws that exist as they are today. as I think you saw that with Chief Howell, defended what is on the books in the city of Racine, because the idea of some change that people have been talking about or thought existed. So, and also I really didn't want to put anybody on a spot on the election year for that. So that's my only comment, that I just felt that they would probably uphold what the law is and what they do. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Supervisor Osterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we certainly heard a lot. And it sounds as though the discussion and debate keeps going back to the legalization and decriminalization of marijuana, and that's not what this resolution is about. It's simply asking the questions. That is all. Supervisor Shakur and Supervisor Dembski put it very eloquently. And I have to say to Supervisor Miller, I love you, sir. You know I do. But if it's not ours to decide, and that is true, it's not ours to decide right now, it is certainly ours to create the voice for those people around us. I supported the Ridgewood referendum. That was a big deal. The reason we want to have this referendum, rather than a position statement, I suggest, is because the question affects everybody across the board. It affects children who are having seizures. It affects elderly people who are afflicted and bedbound and in pain. And it affects people that are, apparently addicted to opioids. Apparently the information this helps. It affects people who don't vote. With the Ridgewood referendum, that was dealing with taxpayers' money. What we're talking about here is affecting everybody's life, and they deserve a say, and that's what I'm asking for. Thank you.
Supervisor Wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to belabor anything, but I mean, if this was a vote up or down on legalization of medical marijuana, I'd vote for it immediately. Okay? I don't need any more data. I have all the data I need. I've lived through it personally with my wife's family. I know what the benefits are, period. However, this is not about that. This is beyond that. This is legalization of marijuana, which I, again, was not at that meeting. The way that was worded, I had a problem with. I'm 65 years old. When I was in high school, guys would want to get in my car with marijuana, I would not let them. Have I ever used marijuana? No. Have I used any other opioid? Yes. For pain and after surgery, but not, I've never been addicted to it, whatever. Putting this on a referendum, basically, I'm not too old to change, have my mind changed. My mind was changed on medical marijuana. My mind hasn't been changed at this point on legalization of the drug itself for recreational use. Putting this on the referendum helps me see where we're at, not only as a county, but hopefully going forward. So I'm definitely voting. I'm not particularly fond of referendums or voting for them, but I will vote the way this is working.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Not seeing any? We will do a roll call vote. It passes 11 to 10. We will now move on to Resolution 2018-45.
Mr. Chairman, would you like me to read the rest of the group on the majority vote?
No,
or just?
Supervisor Bernberg asked for 45, 46, and 47 to be separated, so I thought we would do those first, and then we'll do the others later.
All right, I was not sure. Next, we have resolution number 2018-45 by Government Services Committee in support of increased public defender access and pay.